So thank you for coming. And today we are going to talk about open source use, and open source ecosystem in .NET. And this presentation contains two parts. First will be mainly I will be talking about some good practices, how incorporate open source technologies in your products. And second part, where I think you can participate as well, will be about talking and discussing different components. So I prepared, I think, 10 components which I think are good and not widely known. We can discuss how they're used, and I'd like to hear from you. What do you use and what do you like, and we can discuss all of them. So .NET wasn't known since the beginning as a very open platform and as a very open community. And Microsoft realized that they are far behind other communities in terms of open sourcing, in terms of available projects with open source. So if we'll go right now at GitHub, what we'll see is that for C# we have around 60k repositories, and for Java we have like 4 times more. For Ruby, more. Even for Go, we have already half of the repositories or half of the projects compared to .NET. And Go is like 4 years old. So there is a gap. And what do you think is the most popular language on GitHub? JavaScript. And it is? Yeah, JavaScript. JavaScript is the most. And Microsoft understands that there is a gap, and they understand that they need to be more open, go to the people, to the young people who likes open source, it's cool. So what they did recently, they announced and created .NET Foundation. So how many people heard about .NET Foundation? Okay, so .NET Foundation is a non-commercial organization which helps teams, helps open source projects to survive and to bring their projects on new level. So when they started .NET Foundation, they actually donated lots of their own projects into this organization, and these projects are now maintained by this organization. So, for example, MS Build, Roslyn, WCF, they all belongs to this .NET Foundation. And Microsoft, yes, it's a main contributor, but it's an open source community projects now. And for example, for today, a new project called Poly, we are going to discuss it later in the second section of this presentation, joined as well. So they are looking for new projects which are promising, which needs maybe additional help, and bringing these projects into .NET Foundation and help them. So if you have open source project, how .NET Foundation can help you? They providing some licensing help. So basically they have legal department which can help you to understand how your license works and how other people can use your license and your product. They provide some build machines. So if you need not just open source build machines or open or free build machines, they can provide you some platform for a project. Plus they provide some public relations, so they can print you stickers, they can talk about you at conferences, and so on. So again, anybody have any open source projects? No? Okay, so if you have enough people, you can consider joining them. And even more, it's not just we as the developers can use open source. Visual Studio actually promotes use of open source directly. When you install Visual Studio 2015 now, it's automatically suggests you to install some open source third-party products. So for example, with ASP.NET, what do we have? What projects, what packages I installed? Anyone remembers? You don't care about ASP.NET? You don't use ASP.NET? So when you install ASP.NET, Modernizer is installed, Bootstrap is installed, jQuery is installed. So it's third-party products, and they incorporated in proprietary Microsoft installer. So it shows that they're serious, they're incorporating open source, and they're pushing us as developers to use open source. So it's really difficult at these days to avoid open source projects. And so we will talk about some challenges, but before, if you want to join this movement, if you want to actually contribute to open source projects, how you can start? It's a very common question, how I can start contributing to some projects. You can go to this upforgrabs.net site, and this site is what actually a aggregator for different open source projects. They scan GitHub for projects which publishing some work items marked with up for grabs. So any project on GitHub can mark issue or some request with up for grab tag, and this site will be able to actually find this tag and show on the site. So you can go on the site, you can search for what kind of projects you want to contribute to. It will show you that there are 5 .NET projects, you can change something, some Java, and so on and so on. So if you are looking where to apply your time and efforts, you can go there and try. And the same for you. If you have your project, you have sometimes some tasks which you need help, you can mark by yourself with this tag, and then they will find you and they will add your project to the site. So people may come to you and help you. So, but we are more interested probably about consuming these open source projects. And as consumers of open source projects, usually we are considering these items as the most important. So when we are taking project, what is the license? How it will affect licensing for our product? What is the health of the product? So how long it will survive? What will happen if project will die? So how I will live with my product, which is based on this open source library? How to track what versions people use? Because as soon as you open open source for your team, for your organization, everybody can go on GitHub or NuGet, just grab something and start using. So you need something to protect your project, your organization from this nightmare when every team or almost every person is trying to use different version. And usually there are more than 2-3 libraries which can do the same thing. How to choose which one to use, which is the best one. So let's discuss these things. I'm not a lawyer, so I will not discuss exactly every license, what does it mean. But as a developer, we can do at least 2 things. First, every time when you are trying to get source code or open source library from the internet, check the license. If there is no license, then by default, a default or common law apply. And for this country, for US and for most of European countries, default law means no rights, so you are not allowed to reuse this code. So if you see something without no license, then it's for you should be no-go. If you really want to use some library, try to reach to owner of the library or publisher of the library and ask, was it an intention? So they published code without license because they just want to show something but not allowing people to reuse it, or they just forget. So as I said, always check for the license. If license available, check with your legal department. Are you allowed to use this type of license in your company? If license is not available, go and check with the owner what is the license. And it's not applicable only for GitHub, Codeplex, or sites like this. It's also applicable for Stack Overflow. So you may not know, but Stack Overflow also publish everything under some license. So read carefully what license is used, and even if you are copying and pasting code from Stack Overflow, you are still doing it under this license. So make sure that you understand this license and you follow this license agreement. So what about project health? Let's say you use some library. You really like this library, but maintainer won a lottery, or maintainer was hit by bus. So what are you going to do? Sometimes everything is going good and community is really big, they're doing lots of changes, but at some point they decided to go in a direction you don't like. So any examples you know did like this?
Is it Angular?
Yeah.
Big problem.
Yeah, so Angular just said, okay, we don't like our previous API, we'll create everything from the scratch. So they go in different direction. And the same thing's happening with a smaller project. So you want to be protected somehow from this. And the common approach and what you can think could be fork the library maintained by yourself if this happens. Probably it's not the most interesting for you because then yeah, you need to spend time and maintain the library by yourself. Better approach to think about this potential situation from the beginning and introduce some isolation level or layer between your code, your production code, and the library. So for example, in our company, for almost every library we introduce, open source library, we are introducing a very thin API which plays a role of a bridge between open source library and our code. So in the future, if we'll find that the library we used before is not maintained anymore or moved in some direction which we don't want to follow, we can easily remove this library, replace it with other library, or even write our own if we really need this. But again, this layer should be the best. It will work in the best way if you introduce this layer from the beginning, before you have too many calls to this library from everywhere in your code. And unfortunately, it doesn't work everywhere. For example, with Angular, it will be really difficult to introduce something which abstracts you from the library. But from some infrastructural things like logging, IOC, some MVVM frameworks, you can abstract yourself. So, and it helps. Next question is how to use open source. So how to control what exactly is used by your team and by your department, by your organization. These days, as a .NET developers, we mainly consume open source library using NuGet. So we are getting packages and we install them and use them. You can go directly to nuget.org and get packages there, but maybe more controllable approach to actually create your own repository, internal repository, where you can publish all allowed or all used versions of NuGet packages, and say ask people to actually target all their Visual Studios using this repository instead of common one. If you want to set up this server, there are different servers, NuGet servers, which we can use. There is one from Microsoft, something like NuGet.server, very primitive, and I don't think it's a really usable thing for real life. Then you can try Klondike. Klondike is a free, open source, also very simple server, and it works with if workload is not heavy. We found that if you have like more than 10 developers, sometimes it fails. So again, for extremely small teams, it may be good because it's simple to install, simple to maintain, that's fine. If you have a larger team, you need to think about something different. So there are free options still. You can go with MyGet or ProGet. MyGet is an online service which you can get for free with some limitations, or you can pay for MyGet and have more features available for you. So this is option if you don't want to maintain your server locally. So it's like a service available for you, but all things you publish there is just visible for you. So online, but private. And another thing is a ProGet. This is a server which you install physically on your servers or somewhere, and they also have free version and they have paid version. If you only use NuGet, then that's fine. I think free version will be enough for you. If you want to add something like support of Maven packages for Java, if you want to also handle by ProGet Docker images, then you need to pay. And why I'm saying these different images, because this idea of servers is coming from Java world. So they worked on this idea of artifact management for many years, unlike .NET community. And actually, most of these tools originated from this world and moved to .NET. And if you develop not just for .NET, but for other platforms, you can reuse some of those tools to manage packages for different platforms.
Are any of the tools particularly like more mainstream than others? Like are more widely adopted?
It depends. If you're talking about .NET community, then I think MyGet, ProGet, more used. And MyGet is very widely used even by open source projects. For example, NuGet by itself, NuGet team publish their packages both on MyGet and NuGet. And how they use it? They publish their nightly builds on MyGet, and they publish stable builds on NuGet. And many other projects, for example, Cake. Anybody knows about Cake?
It's a back there.
Yeah, so Cake is a CMake. It's a build tool based on C#. They do the same approach. So they compile every check-in, and by default it goes to MyGet, and only when they're ready to publish something as official package, it goes to NuGet. So you can use the same approach. Combine two different services if you want, or combine different streams. So for example, in ProGet what we are doing, we have multiple streams, and our unstable builds goes to one stream, our stable builds goes to another stream. So then we can switch which stream to use and compile, build our solution. But if you're talking about a wider community, not just NuGet, then probably Nexus Artifactory will be more popular.
Right, so they're not as popular in the .NET community then?
They're not free. So they're expensive,
Yeah.
and they're doing much more than MyGet ProGet. So I think, actually I will talk a little bit about Nexus then, show what you can do with the Nexus. And Artifactory is not only artifact management, so it allows you to manage all artifacts like NPM packages, NuGet packages, Docker images. It also allows you to bundle some documentation to put together. So it's not like just as a NuGet package server, it's a full artifact management system. So you can do much more. And you have life cycle, you can create lots of hooks when something is published, build documentation. So it's very powerful tools if you need. But it depends on your organization, and probably you should start with something simpler, understand your needs, and then grow with additional tools.
Yeah, and Artifactory has a free version, but I don't think it supports .NET, is that right? I think it's, they have an open source version.
It supports. Nexus, there is free version, it supports .NET, Artifactory, yeah, it supports. NuGet packages also. But they're really limited with that. So it's okay, it works, it's understandable how it works with your own packages, but what if there is no package for some library? So for example, you use Telerik Grid, and it's odd that you have everything packaged and used, but for some components you don't have. But it's not a problem. For example, what we are doing, we are just taking these third-party components package them as NuGets, and publish on our server. And in the end, everything, absolutely all the libraries packaged as NuGet packages and bring to application in this form.
I can't think of an example, but I think commercial component vendors, Telerik might even be one, that are actually giving you NuGet packages, because they
Yeah.
know people want them.
So now
So they're starting to release NuGet packages along with all the other libraries.
All I can choose for Visual Studio.
Hmm.
Before was installer, now it's in the pack.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now they understand that there is a need, and instead of installers, they introduce packages. I think still there are some packages not available, so we can use this approach. And if you don't know it for your project, for example, to enforce people to use some repository instead of central repository, we can put the configuration file in root of your project, and this configuration file will be used to get the packages. So it will first use this configuration file to get packages, and then we'll try to search through the configuration of Visual Studio. So you as a project owner can actually enforce usage of the sources you would like to use. So as an example of more advanced server and what else you can do, how else you can control usage of your libraries is Nexus. So as I mentioned before, Nexus came to us from Java World. They created this as a common artifact management library, and it allows much more than just package management. So here is the screen for the Nexus, and what do we see here interesting? So we see a list of packages available, and we see license types. So Nexus works as a proxy. You set up Nexus as a proxy for your Visual Studio. So instead of Visual Studio source, NuGet source directly to NuGet, what you can do, you can say, okay, for now we have nothing published in our internal server, but we want to understand what people use, which packages they use. You can say Nexus, please, if you get requests for any packages, go to nuget.org, download it from there, and give it to the user. So then you set up your Visual Studio to use Nexus as your source of the packages. And after this, Nexus will record all these requests. It will record all packages was requested, all versions was requested, so you can monitor what actually versions are used by your developers and what packages they use. But even more, what Nexus is doing, then they apply analysis and show you what licenses used by the packages. So for example, you know that some particular license is not allowed for your company, and you can easily find, okay, we have 400 non-standard licenses. We need to go and validate so what kind of licenses for these packages exist and are they allowed to not. Plus, they maintain a base of common known issues with the packages. So, for example, they know that package crypt SSL version 9.0 has this defect. So, anytime somebody will request this version, it will appear here. So, yeah, there is a critical defect in the library, and you can easily monitor, okay, so this project tries to use this library, and we know that there is a problem in this library, probably need to recommend them to bump to a new version where the defect is fixed. So it's nice functionality. And what kind of repositories? As I mentioned, they have, we see Android Maven, Dockers, raw is just nothing raws, NPM, and NuGet. So this is main packages they support. And I think this tool is simpler compared to Artifactory in management of artifacts, but they have more added features like this defect tracking and monitoring which licenses available for your projects.
Sorry, Artifactory has more?
So Artifactory is more complicated or has more features to manage your artifacts. So basically you can create complex workloads. You can do some events. If this happened, do this. If this artifact published, rebuild these artifacts and publish that artifacts, something like this. Here it's more like, here's a package, put it, get it, but they have features like tracking of security issues and some license, usage of the license. Different streams. Yep.
Can you like age your packages so that say any builds post a certain date, you can only use a certain package, but then anything pre that date, you have to use a certain package? Is that allowed? Can you do that with this? With a server like this? You know what I mean?
No, that's far as I know.
Okay.
I don't think. So you can, if you own your own server, you can simply unpublish.
Yeah.
So
But if you
just-
needed to maintain it for some certain reason and you wanted to maintain that older package, but you didn't want it to be used in a newer version of the
Yeah,
software.
so what you can do, you can have different streams.
Yeah.
So like very short-lived stream with nightly builds.
Yeah.
Then you have stable build with approved packages. And then you have something like archive,
Yeah.
where you can move these packages. So if some project will need this package, they can switch to another stream or another feed and get packages from there.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. So, any other questions about this? Okay, so then we can have the fun part. Talk about different projects. But before I show it, anybody want to say any projects they really like, really use? So, anything? So, any open source project you want to discuss?
Oh, I have one. NPOI, which is a popular Excel reading and writing C# library.
Okay.
So it actually, the reason I wanted to talk about it was because it has a conflicting license. And the NPOI license by itself is Apache, but then we did an audit this morning and we found out that the sharplib zip library that it has a dependency on is GPL. So
Okay.
that kind of got our folks down the hall at legal a little bit negatively excited, if you can imagine.
Yeah, and this returns us to question about license. As a developers, we need to do something to check all the license and make sure that we show this license to our legal department, and they need to decide are we allowed to use it or not.
Because we have failed to do the diligence on the kind of the dependency library that it was bringing in. It's like, oh, Apache, great, come on in, everybody. Party eating pizza everywhere, but then when somebody looked at it and said, wait a minute, but this uses this other thing.
And in this situation, actually, Nexus will help.
Okay.
Because when you pull your package with Apache license, yeah, it will be pulled, but it also will pull second library, and it will show that, okay, now we have one license with GPL, which is really red, and you immediately see, even if you didn't pull this by yourself, because it's everything going through this proxy, this license will be detected and presented to you. But again, it's expensive. Okay, so then I will start talking. I will do demo for some libraries, and if on the go you still want to, or you want to discuss something, please don't hesitate, show us. So what I have to present, and what you can do, you can just choose in which order we are going, because probably we will not have time to discuss all of them, and we will discuss the most interesting and then with least interesting. So NetMQ is a 0MQ port to .NET, which is a low-level communication library. If you, so anybody use 0MQ? Probably, yeah. Okay, so let's. It's helpful if you want to build some communication application with your own protocol and RabbitMQ, ActiveMQ, and all these things are too big for you. or you don't want to maintain something installed. So you want something simple, low overhead, with possibility to customize your protocol as you wish. This is not good. Poly, which I mentioned as a new participant of .NET Foundation since today, is a library which helps to manage unexpected exceptions. So for example, database or even network. So network disappeared and your application still want to get some data, but you know that this network up and go, so you don't want to fail completely. Poly helps you to retry, to do something until network appears again. Or the same with database. So database is slow, you're trying to get some data, you cannot get it, okay? So you can wait a little bit and try to get this data again. I think before in enterprise library we had something like exception transient block. Nobody used? Okay. Anybody use enterprise library?
Not the exceptions.
No, no exception. Okay. But this is a really small, easy one, but really nice. I can show it. So automapper is something which helps you to convert object of type A to object of type B. So for example, you want to convert your database object into your view model. So instead of manually copying field by field, with automapper you can create a profile or map and say, okay, and now I have this instance converted to this type, and do it many times. GIL is a alternative JSON serializer to serializer. Mainly why I mentioned here is about because of speed. So it's faster than standard JSON.NET. So if you really care about speed, this may be an option. Fluent Migrator is a library and a set of tools which allows you to migrate your schema for your databases. So it's a good practice that you are not creating databases just by scripts and then forget what's inside. It's good to have maintainable schema and migrations between schema. So there is a pattern, migration, and Fluent Migrator implements this migration pattern for database schemas. So it helps you to control your schemas like you control your code, like you control your document and version your documents. Serilog is an event logger library, so probably most of you use Log4net. So Serilog is alternative to Log4net, and why it's here and why it's useful, because it allows you to serialize structured data. With Log4net, what is a common pattern? You have some object, you convert this object to the string, you store the string to log file, and then when you need to use some automation to analyze this file, you need to actually deserialize it into the object, and then you're doing something with this object. Serilog stops this craziness. It allows you to serialize data or store data in a structured way. If you are logging into text file, it will serialize to JSON, so you can grab this JSON from the log. If you are logging into something like database, for example to Mongo, you don't need this step of serialization of your object. Object will be directly transferred into JSON, and JSON will be sent to MongoDB. So you are not losing this information as you go. Liblog, so yeah, if you are creating your libraries, if you have any library and you want to log from the library, it's always a question, how to log. Do I need to log my library with some logging engine? For example, I like Serilog, and I will log from my super new library using Serilog. But then Ken come in and wants to use my library, but he prefers to use Log4net. Okay, now we have conflicts, right? So I will log to Serilog, and he will ignore this and do something with Log4net. Liblock allows us to create some abstractions, which is independent from any libraries, and it's just one file, and you are not forcing anybody to implement any adapters or anything. So for common libraries, it just works as a magic. You add one file into your library, and all applications which use Serialog, Log4net, LogQ, and Log automatically receives all your messages from the libraries. So next one is a mock, mocking library. Who likes to write unit tests?
Next to
No. So I presented this, I think, at London, and asked the same question, so nobody raised their hands. So you are better programmers. So mock simplifies writing of unit tests. Instead of, for example, depending on a real database or real file system, with mock library, you can simulate them. So simple, more readable unit tests. Fluent assertions is also to help with unit test writing. So instead of putting something, assert that blah 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 not null, with fluent assertion you can say that my variable should be not null. So basically fluent API to express what exactly you expect from the variable, from the results of unit test. And HTML, agility pack, this is quite old thing, but I really like it because it allows you to take a real world HTML. For example, if you drop some HTML from the web and parse it and use it, this parsed HTML as in the same way as you use XML document. So basically it represents HTML as a structured format, so you can apply XPath queries, you can browse through this, you can modify if something is broken, you can write to the string back and write to the well-formatted HTML. So if you're working with not good formatted HTML, especially, for example, we have lots of testers writing HTML using front page, using Word. So
Is that still a thing, front page?
yeah, still a thing. Unfortunately. And these tools generate not very well formatted HTML, not clean HTML. So with this tool, you can easily write a tool which will clean anything and format it properly. Okay, and at this point, we'll have a break. I will leave it here on the screen. So think your order, how we will start, and after the break, I think in 10 minutes, we will start discussing the sliders.